Chances are, if you're watching this video, then either you already have a love for flying, or maybe a friend has introduced it to you and it piqued your interest, or maybe you're just curious what it takes to become a pilot. Well, today we are covering the steps that I recommend you take to get your pilot license. But before we do that, let's head over to the airport. I'm Joe Walker, a private pilot who enjoys the freedom of flight and sharing it with those around me. Join me on the journey to becoming a better, safer pilot. Subscribe to experience the joys that flying can offer, and let's take to the sky and learn together. This is Plain Joe. Alright, we are on the way over to the airport. We are going to Manassas Regional because that's the closest airport, and I love filming videos at the airport, so it seems a little bit more relevant to the topic. All right, so we have made it here to Manassas Regional Airport. I'm actually sitting right next to the control tower. There's this nice little spot where there's picnic tables and you get a nice view of the airport, and of course the Manassas Regional Tower right there. So really cool spot to come and hang out. But that is not what we are here for today. Today we are talking about the steps it takes to get your private pilot license. And I've broken it out into 7 main steps. These are just the steps that I took to get my license. So let's get to it. So the first step that I've written down for getting your pilot license is taking a discovery flight. Now, I've talked about this many times, but what is a discovery flight? Well, it is your introduction. All right, let's try that again. What is a discovery flight? A discovery flight is essentially your trial run of flying. So this is when you'll go up with a CFI or a certified flight instructor, and you'll go flying in an actual airplane. You'll get controls of the aircraft, and you'll get to fly around, feel what it's like to actually be in command of an aircraft for the first time. These usually run for about an hour. It changes depending on the school that you go to. Quick tip, I recommend finding a Groupon for a flight school near you. Usually you can get the discovery flight for a discounted rate than what you see on the website. But I digress. A discovery flight is an exciting opportunity to see what it's like to actually be a pilot. This is going to be one of the most exciting experiences that you'll feel as you begin your flight training. Now, a discovery flight is a good way to also discover your comfort levels, right? So maybe you go up there and you feel exhilarated, you're like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And that's great, that's how a lot of pilots will feel. But some others, maybe flying isn't for you. Maybe you'd rather sit in the back seat and just let somebody else fly the plane. And that's all right too. But a discovery flight will help you find out your comfort levels. So what I did was I went and grabbed my logbook, because the discovery flights, some of the ones that you'll do, they typically will give you a logbook. Maybe it's a paperback one, or maybe it's actually a hardback copy, but you'll get your logbook of your first actual flight. And so if I look back through my logbook, so it looks like I took my very first discovery flight on June 12th of 2020. Way before I got my pilot license, but it's still cool to look back at when I started my pilot journey. So again, step 1 is to take a discovery flight, which is like taking a car for its test run, and also seeing what it's like being a pilot. All right, so you've completed your discovery flight, and now you've decided you want to fly. Now we're on to step 2, which is deciding your reason for wanting to fly. Deciding a reason to fly will set the tone for your training. It will serve both as a goal and inspiration as you complete your training and follow through your journey to becoming a pilot. People have various reasons for wanting to become a pilot. For some, it's they've always had a dream of flying. For others, they've always wanted to travel more. And for others, they want a career as a pilot. And for others, they just want to flex on their friends, and that's all right too. But I think it is important to set a goal for your reason to fly, and this goal may change over time, but it will help drive you further as you become a pilot. All right, so now we are on to step 3, understanding the requirements. Let's start by understanding that there are 3 main types of pilot licenses if you're starting out. This is not including the student pilot license. The first license is your sport pilot license. This allows you to fly light sport aircraft. Now, there's a few limitations with this license, such as you can only carry one passenger, you're limited to flying during the daytime with certain visual rules, and you have to have a logbook endorsement to fly in certain types of airspace. You'll get to that later in your career. Next up is the recreational license. Now, this one isn't widely used anymore because of the introduction of the sport pilot license. However, with this license, it allows you to fly slightly heavier aircraft. And the last one is probably the reason you're here, which is the private pilot license, or PPL for short. For the purposes of this video, we are going to mainly be talking about the PPL, but some of the concepts can be applied to the other licenses as well. Now, there are three main requirements for getting your private pilot license. The first is the medical exam, and that is done by an aviation medical examiner, or AME. The second is your written exam. This is what's completed after you go through your ground school training. And the third is the check ride. This is the most daunting of all three requirements, but once you complete this, you get your shiny new private pilot license. All right, so that's exciting and everything, but let's talk the real stuff. Let's talk about schools. Now, there are two main schools that you go to. You have your ground school and you have your flight school. They can be separate schools or they can be the same school. It really just depends on your preference. Now, before I get yelled at in the comments, let me mention that there are two types of schools out there. You have your Part 61 schools, which are typically more flexible, and you have your Part 141 schools, which have a more regulated and structured course. First, let's talk about ground school. This can be done in person, or like myself, I did it online. So what is covered in ground school? Well, this covers all of the fundamentals necessary to fly. This covers basic flight controls and aerodynamics, flight instruments and systems, airports, airspace, weather, navigation, the list goes on and on. Ground school culminates in a written exam. This written exam, you might remember, fulfills one of the requirements for getting your pilot license. All right, so that covers ground school. What about flight school? Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are different types of flight school, such as the Part 61 or Part 141, but you can also go the private instruction route. So perhaps you know a certified flight instructor and you want to do private instruction. That is an option as well. Now, there's a lot of considerations to make when deciding on what flight school to go to. There's the distance from the airport. I happened to go to a flight school that was an hour away. Now, was that my best choice? Maybe not, but I had a flexible enough schedule that I could make it work. So let's talk about schedule real quick. Consider the fact that most of your flight training will be done during the day. However, there are other times to fulfill practical flying requirements, such as you need to fly during civil dawn and civil dusk. This means that you will have to drive to the flight school either early in the morning or late in the day. So consider that when choosing your flight school. Another thing to consider is what is the accessibility of the flight school in general? So how much accessibility do you have to planes and instructors? Remember, when you start out with your training, you're gonna have to fly with a certified flight instructor, so they have to be available and the planes have to be available as well. There are other considerations like how busy is the airport? If you're flying at a larger towered airport, maybe wait times are longer, which means it might cost more money with you burning fuel sitting on the ground, waiting to be sequenced to take off. But at the same time, maybe you're at a towered airport, so you get more communication practice than if you were at a non-towered airport. You should also consider if there are other obstacles in the area. Maybe your airport has a lot of parachuters or gliders in the area. These are things that people at the flight school will be able to tell you about, and definitely questions that you should ask. I'll go into a deeper dive of choosing the right flight school for you in another video. Now, another major consideration is finding the right instructor for you. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of this. You need to find a flight instructor that will mesh with your learning style the best. This will not only make you a safer pilot, but will also help you speed up the learning process. Now, I know there is one elephant in the room that I haven't addressed, which is the cost of flight training. Now, I've broken down the cost in another video, but in general, I recommend saving around $10,000 for your flight training. All right, so at this point, you have completed your flight school, your ground school, you've already done your medical exam, so now you're on to the final part, which is the check ride. The check ride is broken out into two main parts. You have the oral exam, which covers a lot of the ground school information, and then you have the practical exam, which covers a lot of the flight school information. Now, by the time that you get to your check ride, you'll be very familiar with what the process is going to be, what you're going to be tested on, and there's a lot of information out there to help you through that process as well. I'll list some of my favorite instructional content that I use during my check ride down below. And this is not affiliated by any means. This is just content that I found helpful, and I hope it helps you too. But at this point, you've completed your check ride, so now you've got your pilot license. At the end of the day, getting your pilot license is a journey, and we all have our own lives to live. We must move at our own pace, and sometimes life gets in the way. But don't be discouraged. Again, we move at our own pace. All that I have listed are some of the considerations that I made during my journey to becoming a pilot. And understand that it may be different for you. There's many considerations out there, from your family to your job to the cost of getting your flight training. Again, I'll list some helpful information below because it can seem like a daunting process to get your pilot license, but there's a lot of information and a lot of people out there that want to help you get your license. And when you need help along the way, which you inevitably will, the aviation community is there to lend a hand. Pretty much every pilot I've met has been passionate about aviation and helping others get there too. So go out on YouTube, do your research, and ask all of the questions that you have. Drop them down below and I will do my best to answer them as well. And if I can't answer your question, then I will point you in the right direction. So that is my breakdown of the 7 or 8 or however many number of steps that I recommend that you take to get your pilot license. Again, this will change for different people, but these are just my recommendations. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel and hopefully will help expose others to this video as well. My goal is to make flying more accessible, so please stay tuned for future content. As always, thanks and see you in the sky.